So getting into chapter two, um, this is actually a different prophecy, uh, and you can tell that because we have another introduction in the first verse, the word that Isaiah son of Amos saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. It's going to be really helpful as you're going through to not think of Isaiah as writing one verse at a time. He doesn't write one verse at a time. That's not how the scriptures are written, even if that's how they're organized now. That's helpful to think of them in that way sometimes because it helps us to find a verse really easily and locate those principles that are taught in verses. But that's not how the scriptures are written. Isaiah wrote on scrolls. He wrote entire prophecies that we have then imposed chapter breaks on or verse breaks on. And so these are a bunch of different documents kind of put together to create the book of Isaiah. So that book of Isaiah is kind of its own library of Isaiah, if that makes sense. So getting in chapter two, we get this really famous prophecy for the latter days in verse 2, where it says, in the days to come, the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established as the highest of mountains, and shall be raised above the hills, and all nations shall stream to it. And there's latter day application of that prophecy to perhaps a vision of the Salt Lake Temple or temples in general rising up, because this mountain of the Lord's house is this temple. But that's not the only thing that we should think of when we read these verses. It's great and certainly applicable to think about the Salt Lake Temple itself as one fulfillment of this prophecy. But let's think about this vision, this image that Isaiah is portraying with this mountain. So there's this mountain, it's above all other mountains on earth. There's a symbolic value there of everybody being able to see that this is actually the mountain of the Lord, right? There's no doubt anymore that this is the house of the Lord. And what's incredible is he's saying all nations shall flow to it. All nations shall stream to it. And that's kind of counterintuitive. Streams flow away from mountains, right? Down mountains and away toward the ocean. But in this case, because of the power of God, all of these nations, all of these people from all over the earth are going to stream to the mountain. And that happens in all kinds of ways throughout the scriptures where the Lord gathers people to his house. And certainly in our day, when we go in and do work for our ancestors, those ancestors are streaming from all nations, all historical periods, and gathering into the house of the Lord. But this is this image that in a future day, while Judah and Israel may be suffering during Isaiah's day, in a future day, the power of the Lord's house, God's dwelling place on earth, his law, his covenant will be able to gather people from all nations, kindreds, tongues, and people, right? That's the vision here. And he's describing this future day, a day that President Nelson says we're living in. We're in the gathering of Israel, right? He's talking about something that's specific to us. These people are going to say, this is in verse 3, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall come forth instruction, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And this vision of people recognizing how that the true way of happiness, they want to go up and learn the ways of the Lord, and we see this vision being fulfilled. Um, Starting in verse 8, Isaiah speaks to the house of Jacob, this is the house of Israel. Let's walk in the ways and the light of the Lord. Let's forsake those other ways. Let's forsake the evil influences around us, and let's delight in the covenants that we've made, the law of the Lord. Um, because eventually all these other powerful nations and influences, he calls them the cedars of Lebanon, right? These cedars of Lebanon are apparently really tall, mighty trees. Those are going to be brought down, and what's going to be elevated? It's going to be the mountain of the Lord's house. That's what he's trying to help us to see.